a gallon of milk, a tip screen for a Togo coffee nobody poured for you, a gun offered like a small favor in the same aisle as the eggs. 40 European visitors, filmed at the exact moment their assumptions stopped working, all noticed the same three things first. Not the Grand Canyon, not the skyline, the groceries. That's the real footage. Not the polished travel vlog version where everyone says, so friendly, so big, so different, and moves on. The raw clips, someone asks a simple question. What surprised you? What would you warn other Europeans about? And the answer arrives before the filter engages. What makes these particular clips worth 15 minutes of your attention isn't novelty. Europeans confused by America is a genre with thousands of entries by now. It's that this specific batch of interviews happens to touch almost every category where the two continents made genuinely different policy decisions. Who pays a worker's wage? Who regulates a food additive? Who gets to carry a firearm? Who pays for an ambulance? None of these are jokes about Americans being loud. They're jokes sitting directly on top of 40 years of divergent legislation, and the visitor's confusion is usually a more accurate read of that legislation than either country's own citizens tend to have, because the visitor is the only one in the room encountering both systems back to back, in real time with no chance to get used to either. Section 1. The tip. Yeah, they do that over there.
They asked for a tip?
Yeah, they do that over
I
here.
ordered a coffee to go for pickup.
I can buy a gun?
Yep.
We're in a grocery store.
I didn't even know they made cereal this big. How is this even possible? Even y'all chips are huge.
I ordered a coffee to go for pickup. That's the sentence that actually breaks something, not the concept of tipping. Most of Europe already has a service charge culture, rounding up at a sit-down restaurant. The break is pickup. 30 seconds at a counter. You hand over money, someone hands you a cup, and the screen swivels around asking for 18, 20, 22% for the transaction of being handed the thing you already paid for. Here's the mechanism. And it matters that it's a mechanism and not just a custom. In most of the US, federal law lets employers pay tipped workers a sub-minimum cash wage as low as 2.13 an hour, on the legal assumption that tips make up the difference. The tip isn't a bonus for good service. It's the wage. The menu price was never the full price. It just didn't tell you that. It didn't start that way either. Tipping arrived in the US in the 1800s as an import from European aristocratic custom, ironically, and nearly died out entirely by the early 1900s when several US states passed anti-tipping laws calling it a form of bribery incompatible with a democracy. What kept it alive wasn't consumer preference. After the Civil War, the restaurant and rail industries lobbied to hire freed black workers and pay them nothing at all, arguing tips alone would cover their wages, an arrangement that later hardened into the sub-minimum wage law still on the books today. The screen asking for 20% on a Togo coffee is, in a very direct sense, the modern fossil of that 19th century labor decision. None of which means the system has zero upside for the people inside it. In high-turnover restaurants in expensive cities, a good server working a Friday dinner rush can genuinely out-earn a flat hourly wage by a wide margin. Tips scale with how busy and how expensive the place is, a flat wage doesn't. That's the actual trade-off, and it cuts against a purely one-sided reading. The same system that's indefensible at a counter where nothing was served can be, for some workers in some restaurants, a better deal than what a flat wage would replace. Both of those things are true. The system just doesn't distinguish between the two situations, and neither does the screen. You know, tips are huge. Huge isn't a compliment there. It's reconnaissance, the kind that gets passed in group chats before a flight lands. And the frustration underneath it isn't really about the money, though the money adds up fast. A European traveller budgeting the way they would at home can find themselves $40 or $50 over by the end of a single day, without a single line item that looked unreasonable on its own. It's that the tip turns every counter into a small performance you didn't agree to be in. The barista becomes someone whose income you're now personally responsible for, and you're expected to feel good about that, not resentful of a system that outsourced a wage to strangers' guilt. Section 2. The menu. Read out loud. In and out. Chipotle. Pizza logs. A big gulp. A good greasy bacon cheeseburger. Street tacos, baby. Central Texas Hill Country BBQ.
What is something Europeans need to try while being in the U.S. for the World Cup?
Need to try In-N-Out.
Ooh, the burgers, In-N-Out.
Chipotle.
Yeah, pizza logs.
A big gulp.
Need to try In-N-Out. Read that list again and you'll notice it splits cleanly in two. The first half is chain food, recommended with zero hesitation, zero apology. A country with immigrant food traditions spanning 6 continents, and the first 3 answers off the top of people's heads are a drive-through burger, a burrito assembly line, and a hot dog byproduct nobody bothers explaining. The second half, street tacos, hill country barbecue, is something else entirely. Regional, generational, actually earned. The gap between those two halves is the whole story of American food culture in one 9-second clip. It doesn't apologize for the chains, and it doesn't oversell the real thing either. Both get said in the same breath, same tone, same confidence. There's a reason the chain answers come first and the regional ones come second. And it isn't that Americans rank In-N-Out above barbecue in some abstract quality sense. It's proximity. A drive-through is 5 minutes from wherever the interview is happening. Hill country smoked brisket usually means a specific trip to a specific state. The list isn't a ranking of what's best. It's a ranking of what's reachable, which says something quieter about American food geography. The exceptional stuff tends to be regional and requires travel, while the everyday stuff is a chain, standardized, identical in Ohio and identical in Oregon. A European visitor used to a bakery that only exists in one neighborhood of one city has to recalibrate for a country where your favorite burger place might be a 5,000 location corporation.
A lot of energy, but hospitality too.
USA, we are super passionate.
A lot of energy, but a hospitality too. USA, we are super passionate. 2 supers is not enthusiasm, it's an identity claim. And it's paired in the very next clip with
Some physicality from our team.
some physicality from our team. That pivot, hospitality to physicality, in 8 seconds is the pattern European visitors keep tripping on. The same warmth that fills a stadium with strangers hugging also fills it with something sharper if the ref makes the wrong call. It's not hypocrisy, it's one dial with a wider range than most European social codes are built to expect. Social psychologists who study cross-cultural communication have a term that fits here reasonably well. High contact versus low contact cultures, referring less to physical touch than to expressiveness. How much emotional volume a culture considers normal for an ordinary interaction. Countries built on Scandinavian restraint or British understatement calibrate their normal volume low. American public interaction, on average, calibrates it considerably higher. And that's true whether the emotion on display is enthusiasm, hospitality, or aggression. A European visitor isn't wrong to read the friendliness as slightly performative and the intensity as slightly alarming. They're accurately detecting that the whole scale has been shifted up, not that any single reading on it is fake. Section 3, 186 kilos. 186
1.26 kilos. And of course
kilos, and of course the ground beef. Not a holiday-sized purchase, not bulk buying for a restaurant. Ordinary ground beef, sold at a size that would run a European household for a week, presented as the default unit.
ground beef. This is bigger than my future. I mean, look at the size of it. Look at and I got big hands, L-sized hands, but
Ground beef, this is bigger than my future. I mean, look at the size of it. Look at and I got big hands, L-sized hands, but that's the tell. The speaker's own hands stop being an adequate ruler. When your body is no longer the baseline measurement, you know you've left the scale you grew up trusting.
but there is no real bread. So let's take this for example. How many ingredients? Oh my God.
There is no real bread. How many ingredients? Oh my God, 1 gallon. Here's the actual regulatory gap underneath the joke. Not just the reaction to it. US bread commonly includes dough conditioners, preservatives, and additives that keep a loaf shelf stable for weeks, several of which, potassium bromate, certain azodicarbonamide uses, are restricted or banned in the EU under precautionary food safety rules that require a substance be proven safe before approval rather than proven harmful before it's pulled. That's the reverse of the US default, which generally allows an additive unless it's shown to cause harm. Same loaf of bread, 2 completely different legal philosophies about who has to prove what.
It'd be so illegal in Europe. With all these ingredients, oh, that's a lot.
Would be so illegal in Europe. With all these ingredients, oh, that's a lot. None of this is new either, but it's the end point of a trend line that's been running for decades. Data compiled from USDA figures and public health research shows the average American dinner plate, soda serving, and packaged snack size roughly doubled or more between the 1950s and today, while European portion norms moved far more slowly over the same period. The 1.26 kilo ground beef package isn't an aberration inside that trend. It's just the trend, arrived at its logical size after 70 years of bigger quietly becoming the default answer to how much. Section 4. You could buy your whole life there. Whatever you want.
Where I live. Whatever you want at Costco, it's there. You just show up and you could buy your whole life there.
At Costco, it's there. You just show up and you could buy your whole life there. Not a slogan. An anthropological observation dressed as a compliment. Costco doesn't sell products so much as it sells completeness. Enough paper towels to outlast a mortgage, olive oil in containers that need 2 people to lift. Whether that reads as freedom or as a warning about what enough has come to mean depends entirely on which side of the Atlantic you grew up calculating portions on. Both readings are legitimate. Neither cancels the other out. Section 4.5. The Wall of Monsters.
For example, how many ingredients? Oh my.
But it's the best part. Not gonna lie, you got so many different types of energy drinks. That's perfect. For example, I never saw this one in Europe. I never saw this in Europe.
1 gallon, 3.8 liters of pickles.
Of course, we've got a white monster, we've got the regular monster, I've got the sugar-free monster, but this blue one, that's really amazing. I really like this. Count the varieties named in 9 seconds. White, regular, sugar-free, blue. 4 flavors rattled off like brand loyalty is a personality trait, and the enthusiasm here is real, not sarcastic. This is one of the rare moments in the whole set of clips where American retail scale reads to a European visitor as pure upside, no asterisk. There's a regulatory reason the shelf looks like this on one side of the Atlantic and not the other. The EU requires any drink with caffeine above roughly 150 milligrams per litre to carry a mandatory high caffeine content, not recommended for children warning label, and several member states have gone further, restricting the combination of caffeine with taurine or guarana in certain formulations, or capping can sizes outright. US regulation leaves most of that up to the manufacturer's own labeling choices rather than a blanket legal cap, which is a meaningful part of why an American gas station cooler can carry 24 sub-variants of the same energy drink brand, where a European supermarket carries 3. The Wall of Monsters isn't just marketing excess, it's what a shelf looks like when the regulatory ceiling is simply set higher. Section 5. The gun question. This is the section where the format has to slow down, because the exchange itself deserves more than a punchline.
I can buy a gun?
Yep.
We're in a grocery store.
I can buy you a gun. Yep, we're in a grocery store. No hesitation on either side. That's the actual data point. Not that the offer was made, but that it was made casually, by someone who thought they were being generous, to someone who heard it as the sentence right before an emergency. The case for the American view isn't hard to state honestly. The Second Amendment is read by many as protecting an individual right to self-defense, a hedge against a government or a threat arriving faster than police can, and in large parts of rural America, a practical tool rather than a symbol. Response times can run 20-30 minutes, and a firearm is treated the same way a fire extinguisher is treated elsewhere. Framed that way, I can buy you a gun isn't menace. It's the same reflex as offering someone a coat because it's cold where they're going. The European frame is just as coherent. Most of the continent treats the presence of a civilian firearm as itself the emergency, something that requires an active shooter response, not a shopping trip. Countries with tighter civilian access consistently report far lower rates of firearm homicide and mass casualty shootings than the US, and that correlation is central to why European publics see gun access as a public health variable, not a personal liberty variable. From that side, we're in a grocery store isn't a joke about location. It's someone recalibrating in real time how much danger is normal here. Neither side is wrong on its own terms. That's the actually uncomfortable part. Not that one of them is lying to themselves, but that safety gets defined by two different failure modes. For one side, safety means nobody nearby is armed. For the other, safety means you're not the only one who isn't. It's also worth being precise about what "buy you a gun in a grocery store" actually means legally, because the clip compresses something that varies enormously by state. In most states, purchasing a firearm still requires an instant federal background check through the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, run at the point of sale, and a waiting period in some states before the buyer takes the gun home. What's true is that in a number of US states, that background check and purchase can happen at a big box retailer that also sells groceries under the same roof. The "we're in a grocery store" is a real architectural fact, not an exaggeration for effect. It's the speed and the physical proximity that startle a European visitor, not an absence of any process at all, though critics on the European side would note that a background check measured in minutes is still a background check measured in minutes. However thorough the questions on the form.
Store.
I didn't even know they made cereal this big. I was receiving
I didn't even know they made cereal this big. How is this even possible? And then the topic just moves. Guns to cereal, no transition, because in an American grocery store, they occupy the same aisle of normal. That's arguably the most American beat in the entire set of clips. Not the gun, and not the cereal, but the total absence of a pause between them. A European editing this same footage might instinctively cut in a beat of silence, a moment for the gravity of the first exchange to land, before moving on. The actual conversation doesn't do that. It just keeps walking down the aisle because for the person doing the talking, nothing back there needed a pause in the first place. Section 6, deer, roundabouts, and a sugar count. Not every mismatch needs a paragraph of theory. Some of it is just funny, and it's worth letting it stay funny. Wait, you guys just have deer roaming around? Yeah, that's pretty normal over here. Pretty normal is doing a lot of quiet work. It's the sentence that tells a visitor they've been caught being surprised, and that surprise here marks you as the outsider. It's also not a small population living at the edge of American suburbs. State wildlife agencies estimate well over 1 million deer vehicle collisions happen in the US every year, enough that several states publish an annual deer season driving advisory the way European countries publish a winter tires advisory. The deer aren't roaming into American life as an exception. American suburban sprawl, with its low-density housing pushed directly against undeveloped woodland, roam into theirs. The normal in that clip is a land use pattern as much as a wildlife fact. You're telling me these are free? We don't got to pay for these? Nope. Set this next to the tip screen, and the contradiction is almost too clean to be believable. The same country that asks for a voluntary and name only 20% for a Togo coffee, also in the right aisle at the right farm stand or grocery promotion, hands something over for nothing and expects no performance of gratitude in return. Generosity here isn't absent, and it isn't rare. It's just not evenly distributed, and it doesn't follow the logic a visitor might expect. The free thing and the aggressively monetized thing sit 2 feet apart on the same shelf, and nothing on the packaging warns you which one you're about to encounter. So this is a 4-way stop? Why don't you try to put a roundabout? What's a roundabout? That last line lands as comedy, but it's a genuinely odd asymmetry. Roundabouts are common across the UK and continental Europe specifically because studies, including US Insurance Institute for Highway Safety data on converted intersections, show they cut serious injury crashes at intersections by roughly 80% compared with traffic light or stop sign junctions, mainly by removing the T-bone collision angle entirely. The US has been slower to adopt them, partly out of driver unfamiliarity and partly out of infrastructure cost, which means the in that clip isn't ignorance so much as an entire country having built around a design it never had reason to question. What is a pineapple pina? 47 grams of sugar per 12 ounces. That's pretty good. 47 grams is nearly 12 teaspoons of sugar in a can, more than the entire daily added sugar limit the American Heart Association recommends for a grown man in one drink. That's pretty good isn't the visitor being naive. It's the visitor briefly adopting the local unit of measurement before catching themselves. Section 7. The ambulance. This is where the tone has to change one more time because the joke runs out here and something else takes over. Oh, but what's happened? Okay, I'll call an ambulance. I'll call an ambulance. Why? That Why isn't confusion about the emergency, it's confusion about the sentence. Because in most of Europe, calling an ambulance is a reflex with no financial weight attached to it, and the question that follows lands like a second, smaller shock. You guys have to pay for the ambulance? The honest case for the US system. It's built on the idea that healthcare, like most goods, is priced and paid for directly or through insurance, which proponents argue keeps costs tied to actual usage and preserves choice. You can pick your provider, your plan, your coverage level instead of one system setting the terms for everyone. The honest case against it, and the reason this specific clip keeps circulating. Median ambulance bills in the US frequently run into the hundreds or low thousands of dollars, even for in-network transport, and a widely cited study found a majority of ambulance rides result in a surprise bill because the ambulance itself is often out of network even when the hospital isn't. In most of Europe, that bill simply doesn't exist because emergency transport is treated as a public good funded through taxation rather than a billable service. Both systems are trade-offs, not just one being backwards. The American model protects choice and can move faster on innovation. The European model protects against the specific fear in that clip, hesitating to call for help because you're doing the math first. The visitor's why is the whole disagreement in one syllable. It also shows up in behavior, not just in bills. Surveys on healthcare access repeatedly find that a meaningful share of uninsured or underinsured Americans report delaying or skipping calling for emergency help specifically over cost concerns, the exact hesitation the European visitor in this clip has never had to weigh. Meanwhile, defenders of the US system point to something equally real on their side. Countries with fully public ambulance and emergency systems often report longer average wait times for non-critical emergency calls, since the same tax-funded system has to allocate a fixed number of vehicles across every call rather than let private capacity expand to meet local demand. Faster in aggregate, slower in some individual cases, versus slower in aggregate but with no financial hesitation built into the decision to call, that's the actual shape of the trade-off. Not one system simply being smarter than the other. None of this cancels out. The same country that puts a tip screen in front of a to-go coffee also gives away eggs to a stranger without blinking. The same aisle that sells a gun sells cereal boxes that need two hands. The bread that would be illegal in Brussels sits next to a Costco run that the same visitor calls, without irony, buying your whole life. Every contradiction in this list is fully true at the same time as its opposite, and the country doesn't offer you a version with the volume turned down. That's the actual finding, if there is one. It's not that America is better or worse than the assumptions these visitors arrived with. It's that America doesn't have a setting between on and off. You get the whole thing: the free eggs and the tip screen, the roundabout that never got built, and the ambulance bill that always does, the wall of Monster energy drinks, and the loaf of bread that couldn't legally exist 40 minutes away in Brussels, in the same aisle in the same 10 minutes, and you're expected to hold all of it without dropping any of it. There's a reason this batch of clips keeps circulating on TikTok specifically, rather than in a longer documentary format. Each one is under 30 seconds and resolves in a single beat, which is exactly the pacing an audience raised on the same platform expects. A setup, a turn, a reaction shot, done. The format almost forces the honesty out faster than a sit-down interview would. Nobody has time to build toward a diplomatic answer inside 8 seconds of footage. Whatever comes out first is usually the truest thing they were going to say all day. What the clips actually capture more than culture shock is the moment someone's internal ruler stops working. Their hands are no longer the right unit for measuring meat. Their tipping math from home doesn't map onto a counter transaction. Their assumption that calling for help is free turns out to be a European default, not a universal one. None of that makes the ruler wrong. It just means it was calibrated somewhere else, for a country that made a different set of decisions about where the individual's wallet ends and the collective's obligation begins. Every contradiction on this list is a policy choice wearing the costume of a cultural quirk. Most of them didn't manage to hold all of it at once, and most of them went back to another Walmart the next day anyway.